is. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kata imaste katita mahiyasam. Vitaya lokeshu yashak pareyusham. Vijnana vairagya vivakshaya vibho. Vicho vibhutir natu paramartyam. Kata imaste katita mahiyasam. Vitaya lokeshu yashak pareyusham. Vijnana vairagya vivakshaya vibho. Vicho vibhutir natu paramartyam. Kata imaste katita mahiyasam. Vijnana vairagya vivakshaya vibho. Vacho vibhutir natu paramartyam. Ladies? Kata, the narrations. Imaha, these. Te, unto you. Katita, have been spoken. Mihiyasam, of great kings. Vitaya, spreading. Lokeshu, throughout all the worlds. Yashaha, their fame. Pareyusham, who have departed. Vijnana, transcendental knowledge, vairagya, and renunciation, vivakshaya, with the desire for teaching, vibho, O mighty Parikshit, vachaha, of words, vibhotihi, the decoration, na, not, tu, but, parama artyam, of the most essential purport. Translation, Shukadev Goswami said, O mighty Parikshit, I have related to you the narrations of all these great kings who spread their fame throughout the world and then departed. My real purpose was to teach transcendental knowledge and renunciation. Stories of kings lend power and opulence to these narrations, but do not in themselves constitute the ultimate aspect of knowledge. Very interesting message. Purport. Since all the narrations of Srimad... I beg your pardon? What's he saying? Okay. Since, I'll try again. All the narrations of Srimad Bhagavatam bring the reader to the perfection of transcendental knowledge. They all give supreme spiritual lessons through apparently dealing with kings and other mundane subject matter. In relation with Krishna, all ordinary topics become transcendental narrations with the power to bring the reader to the perfection of life. Text 15, just going to read the translation. The person who desires pure devotional service to Lord Krishna should hear the narrations of Lord Uttama Shloka's glorious qualities, the constant chanting of which destroys everything inauspicious. The devotee should engage in such listening in regular daily assemblies and should also continue his hearing throughout the day. Purport. Since any topic related to Lord Krishna is auspicious and transcendental, the direct narration of Lord Krishna's own activities, political or non-political, is certainly the supreme subject matter for hearing. The word nityam here indicates regulated cultivation of the topics of Lord Krishna, and abhikshnam indicates constant remembrance of such regulated spiritual experiences. Two more verses. Raja Ovacha. King Parikshit said, My Lord, how can persons living in the age of Kali rid themselves of the cumulative contamination of this age? O great sage, please explain this to me. Purport. King Parikshit was a compassionate, saintly ruler. Thus, after hearing of the abominable qualities of the age of Kali, he naturally inquired as to how those born in this age can free themselves of its inherent contamination. Text 17. Please explain the different ages of universal history, the special qualities of each age, the duration of cosmic maintenance and destruction, and the movement of time, which is the direct representation of the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. question came last night from Queen Kunti's prayers. Kunti was saying, you who are feared by fear personified are afraid of the stick in Mother Yasoda's hands. The question was, who is fear personified? The suggestion was maybe Yamaraj, because he's the Lord of Death. But my reply was, I've never had that question being asked of me before. My understanding is it's time, because Yamaraj is an agent of time. In fact, anything destructive is an agent of time. The mode of ignorance is the mode, the destructive mode. Destruction, creation, maintenance, tamagun, rajagun, sattvagun. Tamagun is the mode of destruction, but the mode of destruction doesn't just move on its own. The modes don't move. The material nature has modes, but material nature doesn't move without something moving it. Like a stick can whack somebody, but it requires somebody to have that stick as an instrument in their hand. So what's the hand? So there are agents that may hold the stick, but what's the power of the agent that's holding the stick? The destructive force is time. Now, time does more than destroy. Time brings things into being. Without time, nothing happens within the process of creation. Anyway, so back to the main message here. Well, this second half, 2 verses, Maharaj Pariksit has heard this entire narration, and he now is continuing the conversation, not like he doesn't know the answer. We'll say it positively. He knows the answer. That's good. Thank you. He knows the answer, so if you know the answer, why ask the question? He wants to hear from authoritative source. And so supposing you know something, you don't not ask that something again. It's good to hear it again and hear it again and hear it again, and especially to hear it from the right source. And what an opportunity he's got, Shukadeva Goswami. Now, why is he asking about the different ages and he's about to die? This is Canto 12. Is it important to know these things when you're about to die? Why is he asking? What's the importance? It's the answer is its topics in relation to the personality of Godhead. There are 10 topics in the Srimad Bhagavatam. All 10 of them are related to the same thing, understanding Krishna. And creation and phases of time are from Krishna. So it's topics in relation to Krishna. It's of interest because it's in relation to Krishna. And hearing, asking and hearing, this is the previous verse by Shukadeva Goswami, the topics of Uttama Shloka are worthy of hearing. The topics of Uttama Shloka are worthy of hearing because the topics bring one's attention to the source of all things. That's the purpose of the Vedas, to know the source of all things. And how can you know the source of all things if you don't hear? Because we can't directly experience the source of all things. Just this morning I was listening to very interesting room conversation. It was a shouting match, Prabhupada and a scientist. And the scientist, the conversation started with Prabhupada asking his name and asking where he was from and he gave his name and where he's from, and Prabhupada said, oh, I know of the same family, Brahmin family, in Kanpur, and in Kanpur there's a family, a Brahmin family, they have a nice temple, very nice family. So he's making a connection, family to family with the same last name, a Brahmin family. So the man's a Brahmana by birth, and by profession, he's a scientist. And he was making it, the shouting match short, he was saying, yes, the scientist was saying, yes, we're under the laws of nature, but you're asserting that law of nature means there's a law creator and a law enforcer, because otherwise how can you have a law that doesn't mean anything? Where did it come from? And what's the enforcement of that law? And the man said, I don't know. Then he took some other kind of interesting science notion, and Prabhupada ended up getting really angry at the man, said, you're a demon. This is in New York. And the man was like, most conversations people are polite. This man was not polite. He was raising his voice above Prabhupada's voice. He was asserting his views. Even with the background of Brahmin family, he knew Bhagavad Gita because he's from a Brahmin family. He accepted in principle the authority of Bhagavad Gita, but he had greater value in his means of knowledge as opposed to the Vedic means of knowledge. And his position was, I don't know. I can know what I know. And what it is, that's the creator and the enforcer of the law, I don't know. I'm just, being humble but also being honest, I don't know. Here's what I know. We're under the laws of nature, and I, as a scientist, would like to learn more about nature and its laws. But what's behind it, I don't know. Anyway, what's the value of hearing the messages of Uttama Shloka? The value of hearing the messages of Uttama Shloka is what we don't know, we can know. What you don't know by the other two methods, sense perception and logic and reason, you can know by a different method of knowledge. It's important. So we're spending some time because it's right at the conclusion of this whole section of Shukadeva Goswami speaking. Is it sufficient to know just from hearing? Is it sufficient to know just from hearing? Well, there's jnana and there's vijnana, because that's right in the verse, vijnana and vairagya. So both vijnana, Prabhupada's distinction between jnana and vijnana is one is theory and the other is practical application or realization. Practical application of knowledge brings realization. In any field. In any field. Take the field of medicine, because that's one of the things they spoke about was, smallpox. Now, anyway, without the man's argument, there's merit in the findings, medical science, of a cure for smallpox. So I place value in that because I can see its practical result. Then, the answer to the question, where did that inspiration and knowledge come from? I don't know. From the scientific method, experimentation, trying this, trying that, and presto, here came the solution. some inoculation, and people can be prevent and cured from smallpox. So that's a kind of knowledge, sense perception, and inference. From this you infer something that's unknown. Even you may not have directly experienced it. You can infer something, even you haven't directly experienced that something, by reason and logic and inference. So that's a system of knowing things. There was an interesting exchange when Madhvacharya was a young sannyasi. He traveled here and there at a certain point in time. And one of the places he went, there was a proponent of Nyaya, or Anuman. The person was a very celebrated orator, highly learned, etc., and he was giving this whole talk, bombastic talk on Anuman, or inference, is a valid means of knowledge, and he went on and on and on. And at the end, there was discussion, because the process during his time, the process was somebody would say something, and then they would challenge people to refute it. And if somebody could refute it, then the one that was defeated would have to become the student of the one who defeated them. It was like that was the tennis match or something. Back and forth and back and forth. So that was the system. So he presented his Anuman is sufficient means of knowledge. And Madhvacharya spoke in opposition to it's an insufficient pramana, or means of knowing, evidence. That's like what this scientist was saying. My logic doesn't tell me that what is that which is there something even that's the law maker and the law enforcer. I just know there's laws of nature, and we're subordinate to the laws of nature, and I want to learn more about it. So anyway, what's superior is Shabda. Not just Shabda, but Aparusheya Shabda. Aparusheya Shabda means from a perfect person, beyond the fallibilities of Purusha, the Aparusheya, infallible source of knowledge. And Uttama Shloka, back to the previous text 15, the messages of Uttama Shloka in themselves are sufficient to do two things: awaken transcendental knowledge, vijnana, and bring detachment, vairagya. It's not a new message, it's right in the very, very beginning of Canto 1, Chapter 2, Bhagavatam. Who knows the verse, Canto 1, Chapter 2, Bhagavatam? Vasudevi Bhagavati, you know the verse? I'm asking him. You don't know. You like to learn a verse? You'd like to learn a verse this morning? Listen. You know the verse? Vasudevi Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Chaya Dahaitukam. Same. Vairagya means detachment, and Jnana means knowledge. So from Bhakti Yoga unto Vasudeva, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam chalya ahaituka means causelessly. Hetu is cause, and ahaituki means without cause. It's just built within the system. It doesn't need a separate cause. There is no separate cause. Bhakti itself is sufficient to do these two things. Vairagya, detachment from illusion, and knowledge, transcendental knowledge, causelessly arise from Bhakti Yoga. So these messages, back to text 15, the messages of Uttama Shloka have that power. Now we're going back to the very first verse, where text 14, Shukadeva Goswami says something very interesting. I'll read it again, text 14. Oh, mighty Parikshit, I have related to you the narrations of all these great kings who spread their fame throughout the world and then departed. My real purpose was to teach transcendental knowledge and renunciation. There's Vairagya and Jnana. Stories of kings lend power and opulence to these narrations, but do not in themselves constitute the ultimate aspect of knowledge. So if they're not unto themselves constituting the ultimate aspect of knowledge, what are they? It's not superfluous, because the next verse is, they're connected to Uttama Shloka. In connection with Uttama Shloka, they take on a spiritual potency. Something that's used, sound, or paraphernalia on the altar, or the temple room, etc., etc., that which is used in service to the personality of God, it takes on a spiritual power. The spiritual power is the bhakti power. And bhakti infuses spiritual power. So, in themselves, stories of kings don't have some spiritual efficacy, but the Bhagavatam is filled with such stories, but they're not just stories of kings. It's not the stories in themselves that constitute the ultimate aspect of knowledge. The ultimate, although they, by hearing them, because they're in relation to Uttama Shloka, they have the power. Because they're in relation to Uttama Shloka, they have that power. And that's the difference between Srimad Bhagavatam and fiction. I was having a discussion, I'll end with this. I was having a discussion with a very careful reader of Srimad Bhagavatam and other Vedic texts. And the discussion went like this. One of the reasons given why Sita was banished by Ram, banished, sent to the forest, sent to bear her children after several months of pregnancy, and that's like Ram was being criticized for, how can you send your pregnant wife to the forest? Come on. You protect your wife. You can't send her to the forest. So there's like 8 different explanations, but one of those 8 is there was a curse of a Brahmana named Bhrigu Muni, who cursed Vishnu because Vishnu had chopped off the head of his wife. Come again? the narration from Kurma Purana, and it's also in Padma Purana, goes like this. The demons and the demigods were having it out. And the demons were being victorious. Indra came and led the charge, and so the demons fled. They were being defeated by the demigods. And they fled to the ashram of Bhrigu, because the wife of Bhrigu was a very compassionate personality. When they took shelter of, now the question was not the event, but the name, because Bhrigu had more than one wife. He was a Brahmana that had more than one wife, but commonly it's described Khyati, gave shelter to the demons. And Indra came. Indra wanted to get the demons, and Khyati threatened, she didn't do it, she threatened to kill Indra to protect the demons. Leave these guys alone. They took shelter in my ashram, or our ashram. The demigods that went to Vishnu, helps, and Vishnu came and instructed her to release Indra. She didn't release Indra, so he cut her head with his Sudarshan chakra to protect Indra, because that's one of the functions of the personality Godhead. And when Bhrigu came back and understood what happened, because he's a Brahmana, he understood what happened, he cursed Vishnu. As I have had to be separated from my wife, you will also. Because the Brahmana's curse, it had to happen because Vishnu upholds the word of the Brahmanas. So it was a consequence. It's one of the explanations. Sita's being sent to the forest had something to do with the curse of Bhrigu to Vishnu. Now that's just a story, but it certainly has relationship. It's narrated in relation to Sitaram, who are transcendental. So how can hearing about he did this to her and they did this to them and back and forth and mundane stuff, how can that have anything to do that's beneficial for us? Why are we bothering in front of Radha Nila Madhava to talk about such topics? It's in relation to the personality of Godhead. The topic, so back to the message of text 14, the topics themselves are not the essence of Vedic knowledge. The essence of Vedic knowledge is to know Krishna. And there's details and details and details, including the next set of questions about time, phases of creation, features of the different four ages. What are people in the age of Kali to do to mitigate the perils of the age of Kali just before he's about to die? It's fix the mind on the personality of Godhead by one means or another means. And this Shravanam Kirtanam process is our principal means. That's the Bhagavatam's method. Shravanam Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam. That's our process. Okay. Discussion.
Hare Krishna, thank you for an excellent class. Um, Excellent to see you again this morning. Uh, Thank you for opening whenever you're talking about the Krishna being the fear of fear personified. That's always one of my favorite phrases. Yeah. Because the awe and reverence is one thing, but when I first started reading these transcendental topics, I literally had a fear, even of the holy name. So whenever I first read that in the first canto of Bhagavatam, it resonated with me very deeply.
Good. Good.
I wanted to talk about you used the word the inferences.
Yes.
And Bhagavatam is so expansive, and it deals with so many transcendental topics and so many scientific topics, the cosmology, all these things like that. With the limited fund of knowledge as a neophyte, sometimes it's very, very difficult to make an inference with the fear of being wrong, especially when you're talking about with multiple timelines.
Especially what?
When you're talking about with multiple timelines, like with Vishnu and then the avatar of Ram, whenever we're talking about different lives and different periods, how can we make a correct assessment or inference in the relationship between the two?
By hearing from the right source. The adjustment is by hearing from the right source. So our pea brain can't fathom the inconceivable. We can acknowledge, okay, there is that which is inconceivable. And my pea brain can't fathom the inconceivable. Now what? Which is kind of what your question is. You go to proper authority. Supposing you hear from proper authority and you don't understand it, that's quite normal. Then you hear it again, and you hear it again, and you hear it again, and you hear it again. And by hearing it again and again, something happens. What's that something? Something may happen. And that something that happens is there's cleansing and there's awakening. So that is to say, Chetadarpana marjanam. The mirror of the mind becomes cleansed. Of what? Cleansed of dust accumulated for years together. The material conception of life. Because it's that material conception of life, by the way, that's the cause of fear. That's one of our topics yesterday. Bhayam dutiyam abhiniveshitak syat. Fear arises from absorption in the bodily conception of life. So if one has absorption in the bodily conception of life, that's the dust. And the hearing process cleanses dust. It cleanses the bodily conception. And when the bodily conception is removed, what's left? Well, if you're a Vaidist, it's nothingness. And if you're an impersonalist, it's Brahman. And if you're a Vaishnava, it's being the eternal servant of Krishna. Shri Shri Radha Nila Madhava Ki. So in that conception that I'm meant for service to Krishna, and then you go on hearing what you didn't understand before, just keep hearing. Out of faith in the source that you're hearing from, and slowly, by Krishna's mercy, the light may go on. And even if the light doesn't go on, you continue with the hearing, because it's the right thing to do. And out of Krishna's kindness, the light may go on. Oh, that's what it means. Or at least a little bit of understanding of that which I didn't understand before, just by descending mercy of Krishna. That's how to proceed. Something else?
Hare Krishna. I hope it's okay. The side topic about time personified, or about fear personified, I was wondering, is time personified not Krishna?
Time I am. But time, here's two things. Krishna is time, but time is also referred to as Kala Shakti. So there's the difference and non-difference between Krishna and his Shakti. And then there's eternal time, and then there's time as we know it kind of time, past, present, future time. And that's an expansion of Kala Shakti, time as we know it. But that's all under Krishna's, it's Krishna's energy. So, you know, in one sense, yes. In another sense, not exactly. Because Shakti is not Shaktiman, but there's a non-difference aspect. So time is Krishna, but time is Krishna Shakti, or Kala Shakti. It's okay? Got it?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, I've heard Prabhupada say that don't try to just blindly follow what we're trying to say, ask questions.
Yeah.
And at the same time, like we say, like understanding like many aspects of Krishna are inconceivable. And there is, I don't remember the exact verse which says like, just by arguments, you cannot understand the absolute truth. You need to follow
Yes.
the steps of Mahajanas.
Tarka apratishta.
Yeah.
Now? What's the punchline?
Yeah, so exactly what approach should we take in understanding Krishna and preach to others? This logical approach of arguments, or belief, or just following the instructions of authority, or mixture of them?
You know, our business is not to argue. Our business is to present the message of Krishna as Krishna has given it, or the representatives of Krishna have given it. That's our business, that's our life. Now, if somebody like this fellow, I mean, I've there are many recorded conversations. This was a unique one. The guy was really out to lunch, arguing, you know, raising his voice above Prabhupada's voice again and again, and consistently. So there's a fellow that needs spanking. So Prabhupada gave it to him. And the way that the conversation finally ended was nice. There wasn't full agreement, but there was a point of agreement, and then Prabhupada stopped the discussion. This is our point of agreement, after calling him a demon. So, he didn't emphasize that, but he said it 3 times. So that's not normal. Our business, which is your question, is our business is not to argue, but to present the teachings of Krishna as Krishna has given it, or about Krishna as it's been given by Scripture and received through disciplic succession. And people can accept it or not accept it. You know, people are making choices. They can accept it or not accept it. We may have conversation with persons that don't accept it to a limited degree, knowing that the sound vibration is ultimately beneficial on the soul platform, even if they don't accept it on the mind platform. So it very much depends, but our business is to repeat the message of Krishna and give at least an opportunity for persons to hear and to some degree, whatever their capacity, to understand. So it's not argue. Reason, logic, yes. It came out in discussion yesterday evening. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's discussion with Chandkazi. And what kind of religion is this that you eat your mother? I mean, that's confrontational, right? But there was a purpose, and he knew, because he was a learned person, he knew lots of things. Just from a worldly perspective, what to speak of. Then finally he asked the Kazi, yesterday you gave this decree, no chanting. And all day long we were chanting, and you didn't do anything. Why? I mean, it's not that Mahaprabhu didn't know. He said, I'll tell you privately. No. So, we're not Mahaprabhu, but we're not omniscient and so forth. But we may, depending upon circumstance, because he knew the Kazi was learned, he had the discussion along those lines. So it depends on the circumstance, whether we're going, to what degree we present truth to another person with their credential. There is a teaching that says, it's a Vedic teaching that says, those that have knowledge should not give knowledge to a person that doesn't have control of their senses. It's a Vedic teaching for Brahmanas. You receive, this is their credential, and once you have it, you don't give it to people that can't control their senses. Now, what do? Because who can control their senses? Just keep your mouth shut. But we preach, but then we titrate what it is, that the message that we give, depending upon the person and the circumstance. And the purpose is not just to win an argument. I defeated you, na. That's not our program. So according to your capacity, according to the circumstance, according to the other person, conversation that help people get a little light in the message of Bhagavad Gita, who is Krishna. Okay, I'm going to end. There's one more. Oh, you got one more. Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Last but not least.
So you touch upon jnana and vijnana. With a nice example, it's not sufficient, for example, to learn, to hear from a book of medicine. You actually need to practice to become a surgeon. At the same time, we have like 9 processes of devotional service.
9 processes.
Among which one is Shravanam.
Yeah.
So, apparently, actually, just by hearing, one can get, according to Srila Prabhupada, I've understood that by just perfectioning one of these processes, you
Gradual, yeah.
So, but what is the vijnana of hearing?
What's vijnana?
Of hearing.
When you practically apply what you've heard. Without practical application, no vijnana. It stays theoretical. Theoretical, practical. That's the distinction between the two that Prabhupada has given us. Theoretical, conceptual, notional. Okay. Now, do you live that way? And if you live that way, then you get vijnana. At least potential is there. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So...
I'm waiting for the but.
No. So by only hearing, only Shravana is not possible.
No application.
We need to actually apply to get...
Come on.
Yeah.
We went through that.
Thank you.
The evidence that one has heard is one will do. The evidence that one has not heard is one will not do. It's called scholarship. As a scholar, I can say. As a scholar, I can say, this is this, and that's that. Om Jai Jagadisha Hare. And have no realization. because no practical application. And then so practical application includes bhakti. For what purpose is the application? Because that's part of hearing. Part of application. Part of hearing is application includes bhakti. Okay, we're going to end. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
This morning program, what time you are leaving, and can I ride with
11:15.
you?
So Shashimukhi is going to let me know if it's running late. I can leave after 11:15. As you know, functions don't always start and end at time. So that's the plan. Is 11:15, something at 12, and then after 12 is a class, and then prasadam. 11:15.
I was thinking to ride with you if it's possible.
I forget who's the driver, but
I will find you some.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't remember.